How easy was it to make the fight with Sturm? And what were the thoughts from your point of view behind taking on Sturm as the first defence?
Well, obviously, he was the mandatory with the IBF. I said in the press conference that he would have been probably our voluntary choice as well. And it's quite unusual that happens. The mandatory is generally a challenger that, is less lucrative or one that you really want to avoid. But obviously with the link up with Martin Murray and Matthew Macklin, two fighters that have faced Sturm before and failed to beat him, it was always a great option for us. And we always knew that financially we'd be considerably better off coming to Germany, but it was always our intention to hold the fight in the UK. As the purse bid approached and we weren't able to make the necessary deal in time, we knew and heard that Felix was looking at some other options, and it wasn't a fight that we wanted to lose. We looked down the other options for our mandatory, and they were far less lucrative. They weren't the legacy fights that I call them, that I'd like Darren to be in, and fights that I know Darren would be up for. And when we were able to introduce other things into the deal, like the neutral officials, like the rematch fight in London, everything started to come together. Financially, it's a life-changing opportunity for Darren Barker, but whilst I wouldn't stand here and say it's all about the money, there were other things attached that made it the right choice. And people have to remember that this is a job as well. It's the hardest way to make a living in sport, in my opinion. So you do have to be rewarded financially. And when you look at the places he's been, he had no qualms. We sat down, I outlined the deal to him and Tony, and they snapped it with both hands. So we're happy. And I think to create a legacy, it's not about staying at home and fighting at home. It's very nice to do that, but I just feel that to fight Martinez, give him a great fight, to beat Gill in America, to beat Sturm in Germany, that's going to really be something to talk about, either after the Sturm fight or even when all's said and done.
That's what a lot of people say. World champions often stay in their own country. Felix fought a lot of times in Germany, but Darren he's collected the belt abroad and he's going to defend it abroad. It's kind of what a world champion does, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And again, if we hadn't come here, we would have lost the fight, and we didn't want to lose that fight because it's the perfect fight, and the deal was the perfect deal. So we made the decision. Few people in England say, why are you going to Germany? And I said, well, the weather's nice in December, but it's at the end of the day you have to do what's right for the fighter, and it is a business and it is a career, but more than that, beyond the deal and the rematch and the money, we believe he's going to win quite comfortably, really do, and I think stylistically he's got the perfect style to beat Sturm. Sturm is a great fighter, has probably seen better days in my opinion, and I think Darren's coming on and on and on, and mentally he's better than ever. He believes in himself more than ever, and he's got a real swag now, that he's world champion. So I think he's going to come here and do a number on him, and like I said, go back after that, an even bigger name, because it is Germany, he's only an hour ahead, so it's a big fight in the UK as well, and as you'll see from the press conference tomorrow, it'll be a huge turnout, and he's a big name in Britain right now.
It's a win-win situation for Darren, isn't it? If he to come here for Germany, it's not what the fans wanted perhaps, but he's got that rematch clause. Whether he takes it or not, or needs it or not, would he fight? His next fight will be most likely in the UK. Would that be true to say? Yeah,
I mean, obviously, again, you don't know what opportunities are going to arise. At the end of the day, there's certain territories that attract higher TV income and revenue than others. Obviously, Germany is blessed with that, as is America. And outside of the pay-per-view model in the UK, there isn't the licence fees to compete with certain territories. So, if a fight comes up with Martinez in America, if a fight comes up with Golovkin in America, these are all, every fight has to be assessed individually. We want to fight in the UK at some point, and beating Sturm would give him an even bigger fight in the UK, next spring, summer. So, I think this is really our last fight on the road for a while, but I think victory over Sturm can set him up as a pay-per-view fighter against those bigger names in the UK.
Big question that I'm really interested to know is whether there'll be any Matchroom or any more other Matchroom fighters on the undercard at this show. I know it's promoted by Felix's company. Will there be any of your guys coming over as well?
Yeah, I'm going to speak to Carsten and Felix about that. I mean, it's certainly our intention to bring some over. It's a money issue at the same time. I don't know about the normal shows, who they have on. You probably know more than me, but I'm sure he has his fighters that he wants to get on as well. But I think there's going to be a big travelling support in this fight for Barker. I would think we'll take over 1,000 tickets. So therefore we'd like to bring some Matchroom fighters on if Carsten and Felix allow it and if there's space. So we've got a lot of shows ourselves coming up as well, where they're all in action. So whether it's a Joshua or a Campbell or a Callum Smith, or it'd be nice to get some of them involved.
What's that going to happen in 2014? Are you going to keep looking at signing fighters, or is the stable full now?
Well, we've got another signing tomorrow, which we'll make just before the Felix Sturm press conference. We've just done a new deal with Sky, which runs till the end of 2016, 20 shows a year. So, because of the pay-per-view model opening up as well, that gives us some additional shows as well. Before that started happening, we were reaching quite a full point. Of course, we've got the other situations where certain fighters will travel to fight for world titles. Obviously, Barker fighting Gill freed up a spot for someone else on a show. Bellew fighting Stevenson, later this year frees up another spot, etc., etc. So, I think we're nearly at full point. I mean, we've got a formidable stable, probably one of the best, well, certainly the best Britain's ever seen. I think it's up there to rival any other team in the world. So, British boxing's on a huge buzz at the moment. You've got obviously Jamie McDonald's won a world title, Scott Quigg at the weekend, Darren Barker, Carl Froch, Ricky Burns. And they're, 4 of those are our fighters. So it's in a great place, and obviously the young guns coming through. Joshua looked very good at the weekend. Luke Campbell looks exceptional. Callum Smith, and then you've got the other guys that are on the verge. The Kell Brooks, the Tony Bellews, the Brian Roses, the Lee Selbys, Anthony Crollers. There's so many fighters, and it's a really good time for British boxing. And I think now what people are realising, especially the fighters, is you've got to have proper fights. You can't just take these easy fights because the public won't fall for it anymore. I always take the mickey out of my old man about, look at Eubank's resume. Unbelievable fighter. Look at some of the defences he made. I mean, how they got away with it at the time. Because back then it was more about the show. It was about simply the best. It was about Eubank strutting out, jumping the ropes, that kind of thing. Now everyone's having to have proper tough fights. And that's how it should be, really. And sort of as a fan, as a promoter, that's what I want to see. And I think that's sort of making the sport great again, because people are seeing the value for money. We had a show at the O2 on Saturday, loads of great fights. You can't have one-sided cards anymore. I think of the 7 fights, our guys lost 2 and drew 1 and won 4. So, I want them all. I want them to win every fight, but it's never a bad thing for boxing if some of our guys don't always win, because then otherwise it does become boring, and sometimes you're not good enough to win, but you've got to improve and come again, like Darren Barker did against Sergio Martinez. He lost, he learned, he come forward, he won a world title.
I heard a rumour about Froch and Golovkin, or those 2 names together, that came from you. It was written on one of the websites. Is that true? Is that something that you're looking at much?
It's definitely a fight that I think, as a fan, is probably one of the most exciting fights out there. I've mentioned it to Carl Froch, I've mentioned it to Rob McCracken. Absolutely not a problem in their eyes to take that fight. I actually have heard that Golovkin's not as keen to take that fight. Of all the potential challengers, that's the one that him and Tom Loeffler sort of look at and say, because you can hit Froch with an axe, and it seems that he doesn't move. So, but for me, Froch against Golovkin is just a wonderful, wonderful fight. And one of the few people in the world that I believe can stand up to Golovkin and give him a proper fight. But Froch has got to fight Groves, who poses a totally different challenge. And people in the know how difficult a fight that's going to be stylistically. Froch is the favourite, but he's got to beat Groves. He's not getting any younger. And but certainly, Chavez Jr. is another fight that we'd love for Carl Froch. Andre Ward again in time, but first things first, November 23rd, he's got to deal with Groves, and if he can do that, then he's got some huge fights on the horizon.
Can I take the opportunity to ask about Joshua?
Yeah.
And how he's going to be progressed? Is he going to be given a dozen journeymen, or is he going to be kind of stepped up a little bit faster than any ordinary heavyweight might be?
I mean, it's really about understanding where he's at, because don't forget he's only had 44 amateur fights. So Campbell's had, I think, about 140 amateur fights. He's at a level where I believe he can challenge for a British title very soon. With Joshua, it's about assessing where he's at. On Saturday we put him in with Emanuele Leo, who was 8-0. Obviously not a world beater, but has won 8 times, has never lost, came to win. And there were a lot of people before that fight even saying, well, this is a bit risky, and I wouldn't say it was risky, but you don't really know. I didn't know what we're going to get from Joshua. Are we going to get someone who jabs and moves and takes his time? Are we going to get someone who comes out on the attack, which we got? And we know he can punch, and he's a huge size. But every opponent is going to be different. On October 26th, we'll fight a guy called Paul Butlin, who's 14 and 15, who's very experienced, fought a lot of top fighters. Of course, Joshua's expected to win. But every opponent should pose something different. Some will try and frustrate him. Some will hold a little bit. Some will try and box him. Some will try and fight on the inside. Some might be a southpaw. Some might be old. Some might be young. So everyone, this is a big investment for us and Sky Sports with Joshua as well. So every time we invest, which is essentially every time there's a bout, we've got to improve him. He's got to learn something. It can't just be, get him out again, boom, what did I learn? Nothing. It was, So on Saturday it was all about the occasion, the O2, headlining the card, going up against an undefeated fighter that no one knew a lot about. And next time it will be going up against more of a journeyman who will try and survive a little bit more. He's more worldly. He's got more ring craft. How does he deal with the experience of this guy?
By ear, then.
Yeah, and I've identified probably half a dozen opponents for the short term. Americans as well, and I think when you look at someone like Pulev, you look at his record and you look at the fighters that he fought on his way up. He was excellently matched, in my opinion. And when you look at, say, the fighters that David Price boxed on his way up, you look at their first 10 or a dozen fights, totally different kettle of fish. Pulev boxed some top kid, Skelton, I think, and people, Sprott, and those kind of guys, yeah. And then you look at Price in his early fights, he fought, very poor level opponents. And then when you look at when he stepped up, he only stepped up to the likes of Tom Dallas, Audley Harrison, and Matt Skelton. Then when he went into a real fight, in my opinion, he wasn't really ready for the likes of Tony Thompson, even though people thought he was. So, the likes of Pulev learnt a lot on that way up, and that's why the investment part is so important, because you've got to make sure that when they get to that level, you've done it right on the way up, not just go knock him out, go knock him out, go knock him out. Every fight's got to be different.
When's the next Matchroom show in the UK?
October 26th, which is Brook against Senchenko. Brian Rose in a final eliminator against Javier Maciel, top-ranked fighter. Anthony Joshua, Callum Smith, Cowie Afai's back. Adam Etches, Scott Jenkins, it's a good mix. Sold a lot of tickets for that. Brook's very popular around there, and a good fight for Brook as well.
In Sheffield.
Yeah, I mean, obviously Senchenko, ended Hatton's career. That's commercially what he's famous for, and obviously former world champion as well. But it's a step to another level really for Kell Brook when you look at his previous opponents, and it's a real crunch fight for him, being in his position, which is still mandatory for the world title. So any slip, basically, if he loses, that's it. He's done. So a lot of pressure and expecting a big night. Yeah, I've been lucky enough to be around boxing for probably 22, 23 years now. So as a kid, I used to read the British Boxing Yearbook every night, every morning. Knew pretty much every fighter in the UK, every record, and I was speaking to Joe Gallagher last night, and I was phoning him up about opponents for Scott Quigg and Anthony Crolla and.
About Stephen Swift, you phone him up for an opponent for Swifty?
No, he's not a matchroom fighter. No. But he was saying to me that you know your stuff, don't you? But I do. That's what I do. Your site is hugely helpful for that, and I don't think I would say I spend a minimum of 2 hours a day on BoxRec. Looking at records and studying divisions, because it's a strategy game, boxing. It's a chess match, and you need to know about the divisions. You need to know about who's fighting who, how to manoeuvre into shots, and that's what we've done very well over the last couple of years, is had a plan for each individual fighter. Darren's a good example of that. Even Froch, when he lost to Ward, Ricky Burns as well now, and Lee Purdy got a shot, and Tony Bellew, what we've done with the WBC there. And you need the relationships, you need to be clever, but you need to know the division, you need to know the fighters and the promoters, and I think that's something we're very strong at.
It's just you always seem to know everything about, or something about, everybody. Do you do the matchmaking for Matchroom as well? Pretty much,
yeah. I mean, again, we've got matchmakers for the smaller fights, but really, I wouldn't say I do the matchmaking, but I work with the fighter and their team, on the opponent. So, one thing I would never do as a promoter is pick a fighter and say, this is who you're fighting. I've got far too much respect for the fighter and their training team for that. But I will go to a trainer and I'll pick out 4 or 5 options and opportunities and say, look, these are the opportunities. This guy's X, he's 24-2, not a big puncher, been knocked out a couple of times. Or this guy's a little bit awkward, he's Apple. But these are the reasons why I think they're valid opponents, whether it's commercially or because of the route we'll take within the governing bodies. You choose. Do you know what I mean? So, I think I'm as well educated as any, maybe not any matchmaker, but many matchmakers, because just like them, I've studied the game for years and years and years. So I'm not, saying that I'm an expert of training or anything like that, but I think I understand the art of a good match, and more importantly, the art of a good strategy, which is ultimately, the right ethos for taking your fighters forward. Obviously, we've got relationships with every governing body. The IBF is someone that we trust implicitly. We've worked with them, with Darren Barker, we've worked with them numerous intercontinental fights, and of course Carl Froch as well. I don't really look for an edge in that department. I just look for a fair crack of the whip. Do you know what I mean? And you look at the moment, there's so much sort of highlight on fair decisions that it's very difficult. People talk about hometown decisions, and you look here, in my opinion, Matthew Macklin beat Felix Sturm. In my opinion, the Murray fight was very close. I actually gave it to Felix Sturm. It was a draw. Yeah, I thought Macklin should have got the nod, but it's in Germany, and I always say I expect a 1, maybe 2 round advantage for the home fighter, whether you like it or not. And that's not about judges being corrupt. That's about the noise. That's about the atmosphere. That's subconscious stuff that takes over for judges. I'm not saying that's right, but that's just the way it is. And you look at the Gill fight against Sturm, could have gone either way. Gill got it. The Solomon fight could have gone either way. Solomon got it. Quigg against Salinas at the weekend, in my opinion, Quigg won by 2 rounds. There was so much focus and discussion and protest because of the Burns-Beltran fight that maybe that affected the scoring as well. And we'll make a fuss, about, saying that we want it fair, these things happen in Germany and stuff like that. But ultimately, with the IBF and with a neutral official, I think we'll get a fair crack at the whip. And that's all you can ask for, really. Whoever wins the fight should win the fight. But sometimes judges will get it wrong, and it's not that it's corrupt or anything like that. It's just officials who sometimes make bad decisions. But judging is subjective. There's no right or wrong. You see a fight different to me. If you score a fight even and I give it to someone by 3 rounds, doesn't mean you're right and I'm right or wrong, or vice versa. It's subjective, and that's why it's very difficult to govern and monitor, because you're putting the result in the hands of somebody else who's got their own opinions on how to score a fight. So I think the performance from Darren will be so convincing that I can't see it being even that close, to be honest with you.
Do you expect him to be more active? If it goes to decision, he would have probably done more, or at least landed more punches than Sturm, who traditionally kind of starts very slowly.
I think because of his engine, because of the fact that he's over his injuries now. You saw in a Gill fight his engine was phenomenal, and because of his movement, I mean he's very clever. He can adapt to the opponent. With Gill, he decided to fight him and to trade and stand and trade. With Sturm, I just think he'll box him and he'll pick him apart. And I think, like you say, he'll start fast and he'll finish fast. He's fresh. I can't see Sturm beating Darren Barker. I really can't, and that's ultimately one of the decisions while we're here, because we believe so strongly that we'll get the win.
Last question then. How do you? Where do you rank Darren in terms of his ability, his career, let's say, compared to Macklin and Murray, and also the top guys Martinez, Golovkin and Quillin even?
Well, Darren's done it. I mean, when you can't compare Darren to Macklin and Murray, because he's the one that's gone out and won the world title when they've failed. I mean, Murray, in my opinion, was unlucky against Martinez. I felt it was a close fight with Felix, but I actually felt Felix just nicked that fight. And Macklin, he's never really been, he was unlucky against Felix Sturm. I believe he won that fight. He got beat by Martinez, put up a good show like Darren did, but then he got destroyed by Golovkin, which isn't, there's no disgrace in that. In my opinion, as I would say, I believe Darren is the best middleweight in Britain. The fact that he's world champion should cement that thought with a lot of people. And as far as world standing, I think he's as good as all of them. I think Golovkin is the standout, obviously, but beneath Golovkin at the moment, I would fancy Darren Barker to beat the Sergio Martinez of today. He gave him a great fight when Martinez was in his prime. over 2 years ago now. And Quill and I rate he's a puncher, but I think Darren is, they're on the same level. Obviously, like I said, Golovkin is for me the standout in the division. But I think the fact that he's gone over to America, on a rival promoter show and won over there and given a great fight against Martinez, I think if he beats Sturm like he thinks we will here, I think it will cement him as number 2 in the division.
Is there a chance of a rematch with Martinez?
Yeah, we've talked already. My gut feeling is Martinez will fight Cotto. That's what I think will happen. But in my opinion, Barker-Martinez after a Sturm victory is a pay-per-view fight in the UK, and then you start talking about the ability to bring fights to the UK. If this was a pay-per-view fight in the UK, it would have been in the UK. No doubts about that. But it isn't, so we're here, and we expect to win.